my personal most interesting research topic here. Another aspect of this is that the software is what I would call semi-trusted. You know, you could have untrusted software that can't do any harm no matter what it does, and you have the software running on your desktop which can do whatever the hell it wants to you because it has complete access. And what we're used to in the web is software that can not do too much damage. Hopefully it has access to some information, and if it's malicious it can do some damage. And I think we need to contain that and refine that a little more. Like, the worst it can do is write some data that you can easily roll back or delete, that kind of containment. Designing for reliability is another research question. So right now, the web protocols, you tend to speak to one, the URL is one thing at the far end, and that works really well with the current browser. But if you've got smarts in the client, because it's a bunch of JavaScript, or on your phone something smarter, you could have it have a couple URLs, like failover URLs, or some sort of load balancing algorithm it's supposed to do, and that would make the server infrastructure much simpler than we need today. Right now, the million user websites often have a very complicated server infrastructure, and Twitter still goes down all the time. And so I'd like to see if we could design the protocols to be more robust around there. Still using the web protocols, but using them sort of a little bit more smartly. You raised the question of vocabulary translation. Obviously, this is an issue. To get the real interoperability, you need to be able to have all the apps either speak the same vocabulary when they're talking about the same thing, or do some kind of translation between the two. And there's been a lot of work. David Booth mentioned that I worked on Riff. So Riff was a standard that was supposed to be for this, and that's why I spent some years shepherding that group, and it ended up, it hasn't caught on. Nobody's really implemented it and deployed it commercially. N3 can do this as well. OWL can do this in limited cases. Right now, I think JavaScript might end up being that little language in a constrained form, but this is a question for research how to do that. The nice thing is that I think the conversion rules, whatever they are, can be crowdsourced, like all the other kind of data we have out there. You know, conversion rules that you trust more than others, conversion rules that come from one vendor or a different vendor, and hopefully we can have this market of conversion rules that will make them tie things together. And the last point, you might not call this research, but this is some open questions here, which is technology adoption. Even if we could get all the technology problems to work here, for this to be adopted requires a sort of snowball effect that people have to use it and it has to get deployed and build critical mass. And so we're really interested in questions like, what do developers need before they'll develop apps like this? You know, I think they need really simple models. Developers don't really want to think about it anymore. They have to solve the thing they're solving that day. And what do end users need? Obviously, they want really simple models. Developers, users don't want to have to think about what your neat technology is. They want, you know, what problem are you solving for me today? What business users need, you know, they need stability, proven utility, and I think a trained workforce is another important thing. Finally, for the standards, for the industry to sort of snowball along, you need to sort of dovetail user adoption with standards adoption and standards work and move this all forward. People need to have consensus around it. So that's basically our agenda in very rough terms. So next steps for people in the room and people who hear about this otherwise, there's a couple venues for participating in the standards efforts and pre-standards effort, W3C participation. We have the Web ID community group, which is focused on that idea of using an IRI to identify a person. Federated Social Web community group, and the Linked Data Platform working group. Linked Data Platform working group is kind of wrapping up this first 1.0, but I imagine they will be relaunching or extending to do another chunk of work. That's a fairly high commitment if you want to get involved with that, but it can be quite rewarding. Obviously, open source contributions, all of our code is open source, so you're welcome to look at it and patch it and fork it and let us know what cool ideas you have there. And you know, for suitable people, academic collaboration is an option here. If you have expertise in some of these things, you may be much more narrow focused than us and have an answer that we don't have, and we'd love to collaborate on that. And at some point, some kind of business collaboration maybe as well, because some of these things should be commercial services as this starts to take off. And that would require a bit of figuring out how that's going to work, but we'd be interested in talking to people who want to do that. So that's it for my slides. And then Andre's going to demo some of that. And then I can take some more questions. We can take questions together after that.
Everybody want to ask questions? Well, are you going to set up for demo?
This is my whole setup.
Okay.
So is it going to take a second to set up, or are you ready to dock in?
It sounds like he's ready, but do you have a question?
I'm ready.
Well, I'm kind of thinking aloud here,
Yeah.
but so you talk a lot about standards, but I sort of was imagining, suppose I had an app that was like a TweetDeck or something that let me manage all my social media. And when I did a Facebook post or when I did a Twitter post, it was also posting to my server.
Yeah.
And that's all it was doing. And you didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what that was. It was just kind of an RDF stream.
Yeah.
And as more people started to adopt that, and more people had their own, I mean, I would be really compelled to do that, because it would take it out of the Facebook, Twitter world, and I would also have my own. And then I'd start building my world, and then there would seem to be the interest by others in building the interfaces to that.
Yep.
And so a little bit, instead of worrying about how you get all the standards right in the first place, you make it really easy for people to save their data in their own public space. And then you let the rest of the world figure out what kind of applications to build on top of that. So,
I mean, some of that might work, and you don't even necessarily need to use a TweetDeck because...
well, whatever it is.
I mean,
I used that as an example.
I just
Yes.
mean you could, in fact, I think Twitter allows users to extract their own data, so you could empower a gateway to always, you just post to Twitter and it pulls it out and also puts it in your RDF store.
Yeah, and I'm saying, as a user, if I had an app that as I'm posting to any social media site,
Yeah.
you know, the multi-ones, you know, that it's also saving for me, that seems to me to be kind of a first really enabling step to get this data in a
And
form
hopefully
where other
folks
people
will see
say,
Simba and go, oh yeah. So the person who runs TweetDeck or whatever will see Simba and go, yeah, I could add that in 50 lines of code. Why don't I do that too? So that may well happen.
Something else that maybe it's not obvious at this point is the fact that only post, whatever you post in one place. So there's no more Twitter integration, Facebook integration, Identica, and trying to manage 10 accounts at the same time, posting the same content over, I don't know how many places. So that's a huge change. Right, so Simba is our first prototype. It's a microblogging application which relies on the fact that users have personal data stores at home or somewhere that they trust, in some place that they control. And this allows applications to communicate with this data store directly without going through a third-party app. So instead of having simba.co, like this specific host here, propose you the app and also handle the data, they just simply offer whatever is necessary for you to run the app in the browser, and from that point on, you communicate directly with your personal data store, which means that there is no third party involved, so it's pretty safe, as long as you run over HTTPS. So, well, you can probably connect as well, by the way, so if you want to try it out, welcome to. We're kind of looking for bug reports and feedback at this point. So, a new user at this point has either the option to log in using their own web ID or to sign up. This whole sign up process in the end provides the user with a web ID, which is a unique identifier, which is in the form of a URI, an HTTPS URI. And the sign-up process also provides the user with storage space. We have a couple of personal data stores that we run on our own. They are public services, so you can use them as you see fit. And however, don't expect to have like super good backup and redundancy and whatever. They are, let's say, community run, so we're not making money out of them. So basically, in this case, what you will do is you want to have you're a new user. So if you're a new user, you should provide a name like test Simba, for example. You may provide also an email, and then you get to choose storage space, like your personal subdomain. So you could call this test Simba, for example. And click create. And now a client certificate has been issued and has been installed in your browser. This is all part of WebID TLS, which is a authentication protocol based on WebID. So now that you have a WebID, you can log in to Simba. You have to use your certificate. And then you're in. And I didn't close my browser, so sorry.
So that was logging in with the old.
That was logging in with my previous certificate because browser support is really terrible at this point.
So the idea of WebID is just this, having a URL for yourself. WebID TLS is using client certificates, which is a thing some people are familiar with. Like MIT uses them for their students and staff, and some enterprises use them. Other people never come across them at all. And they have some weird problems with browser support. So you can definitely do WebID with normal password authentication, but this demo happens to use the TLS client certificate authentication.
We are, however, working on a way to fix that. Have a new WebID-based authentication protocol that doesn't use certificates anymore. So now, this is.
I don't think my mom would do this. No, this is one of the problems.
This is very experimental stuff.
It's also worse because Andre has several WebIDs. If you only have one, you just have to click OK. You don't have to pick which one you're using each time.
Oh, remember this decision.
This is a very bad moment to find these kind of issues.
You won't forget my previous decision.
So it's not a good chance. Can you demo it with your other one?
Yeah. So I'm going to
Do
do
it
it
from
with Symbols. So basically, well, let's say so once you're authenticated, if I manage to.
He's very secure though.
Right, so this is the way it looks at this point is very simplistic. You get like this area here that allows you to post your messages, and you can browse messages that are posted by people that you have subscribed to. In this case, we are using the notion of a channel, meaning that instead of having multiple Twitter accounts, you only have one account, which is like, well, it's your web ID actually. And you, for this application, for this microphone client, you define multiple channels. And in these channels, you publish things that you think fit the purpose of that specific channel. So in my case, I have a main channel, I have a test channel, and I have a work channel. And I can also manage the people that I have in my network of follow, the people that I follow, basically, I can see that some of them have multiple channels and I can easily subscribe to their channels. I can also search by web ID for a specific person.
Clearly, we want to be able to search by name
Yeah.
and email address, and we just haven't gotten that.
But
far.
that's a very complicated issue because this is a completely decentralized environment. So you don't have a very one particular place that you want to search because you don't know. There's a problem of discovery, so you don't know where to go and discover new resources, like new people. So for that, we're trying to come up with a solution at this point. Hope to get it right. So in this case, you can subscribe to different users and their channels.
Should I go ahead and post something and see if you can see it?
Yeah.
See if something looks live? I'm going to hit post on hello Cambridge Semantic Code meetup.
And this is data that comes from Sandro's server. And at this point, I think you posted like with the public access control setting, but you can also post with private access control settings. And that would apply, that would create a new policy for that specific resource, and it will prevent others from being able to read that post. And the way we do this, because this is where is the web, is that whenever we create a new post, as Sandro said, we are posting to this LDP container, which we are using, whose task is to create new resources inside that container. But we are still missing some important information, such as where should the policy go, or if I'm also going to post some binary resource like a picture, where do I post the metadata for that picture? And we do this. This is actually done by the personal data store. So if you do a head on the resource, so actually let me go back. You post a new resource the first time. The moment you post a resource, you get back a response. And that response, you will see a header, which is called location, which contains the new URI of that resource. Because before you posted, there was no URI defined for that resource. And now, what you can do is do a head on the new URI, and this will return some additional headers, some link headers. And these can be of several types. You can have a link header for the access control resource, you can have a link header for the meta file, and we're using all these headers to navigate our way, to follow our nose around several systems so that we don't depend on a specific implementation of the PDS, but we use the web instead to discover new resources.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if I have this Simba software and if I create my own instance and put it on MIT.edu, simba.mit.edu, and I log in with your web ID, will I get the same data?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so you can change this user interface just by downloading the HTML, downloading the JavaScript, putting them up on your own server and changing them however you want, and you'll see exactly the same postings. That's the key.
Yeah, and there's another point in that the way that these personal data stores have been created, you can physically copy the data that you have on one PDS and move it to a different PDS. There are no databases involved, so there's nothing to export. You create an archive of everything you get, and you move it to the new server, and it will work.
These are just total files.
I have a question. Can Sandro now retract that comment?
You can delete it. Yeah,
He owns that, you don't.
he owns it.
You don't own a copy of it?
I have no copy. I'm getting the contents of that post from Sandro all the time.
You could have a version of the app that would.
I could cache it, for instance. I could cache it.
Or even, I mean, I could imagine a policy that everything I read, I want to make a copy of for me later.
Yeah.
That might be antisocial. It might be better to let people delete things if they want to, but the architecture doesn't rule that one way or the other.
Well, it's a sort of extension. The nice thing is you can have a simple Twitter-like thing, or you can make a sort of beefed-up Twitter where I'm a paranoid Twitter where everything I read I'm going to store and they'll interoperate. So the people using paranoid Twitter will be sharing the same tweets as LDP. As long as they all agree with Simba about how the ontologies to use for the basic tool.
So this is different than email, let's say, right? So
Yes.
in Gmail, you send it, somebody gets a copy, you may delete it, but they will still have a copy.
Yes. And here, the thing is that
Easy program.
in some cases it is. We may
Should be
want to
just
allow.
everyone,
No, but for instance, if you make a copy, you can say at that point, you can modify the copy to say that this is something that I said. But if people want to check this, if they want to, I'm basically the only authority that they can go to and verify that I have actually posted that text. So it doesn't really help you much other than offer you a cached copy of the data. Yeah.
Is there anything that prevents Simba.co to actually store the data permanently? You talked about privacy. So
What
if
do you
I
mean
can
store
post
the
a
data?
malicious
Like
Simba
to post
instance.
somewhere else?
Yeah, and
Like
then
instead of posting to your own PDS, also post to an attacker's
no, like the
server?
application server that you're working with. I know that your data is on another server.
The application runs
that
in the
you
browser.
trust.
The
But if
application
somebody
doesn't run on the
comes
server.
posting this,
Right, a malicious Simba.co could look like it's running the browser, but also be stealing all your data and
right.
shipping
So is
it.
there something
somewhere else.
preventing
There is
that?
nothing that you can do to prevent this.
Well,
You can, however, for example, you can check the network activity and see that there are external posts that don't go to your own PDS.
My mother would not be able to do that.
No.
Even I.
But you can tell her that do not use bad Simba, use the good Simba instead.
and there are some ways, because it's just a static file, you could have signature mechanisms where there's like a robust reputation around it, where it's going to be open source or certified by some authority.
Also, if you wanna, once you have decided that this application is safe, you can also install it on your own PDS. So instead of running it from Simba, you will run it from your own server at home.
We have thought about the question of authenticating to the Apple system. You could say this Sandro can have access to this group, but also any app, and he can get access if he's in this app. And so you have a sort of an idea of authenticating the app as well as the person. And that's effectively what you get with app missions out there to build.
Have like a signing mechanism for the apps.
One other mechanism is you can imagine a slightly different browser security policy that right now browsers have this sort of same origin policy that sets up certain boundaries. You could have a different thing that says the app isn't allowed at all to talk to anything except what it came from, and it comes from your PDS, so even if it's malicious, it can't do any harm. That would